Hi, I'm CJ and this is my RC channel. Okay, so this is the beginning of the Tekno SCT410.3 short course truck, and we're going to be beginning with bags A and B and building up the three differentials. The instructions start with bag A, nicely spoken to you here in big letters. I really love the directions. You know, it's color, which is really nice when you're identifying things like rings and seals, because the actual color of those items are there. They didn't bother going into detail on the bearings, which, you know, graphically is not an issue, but they do give you the size of them, so it's easy to pick out shims from bearings and things of that nature. You just got to remember that when you're looking at something like this, that's a bearing, and you know, it's sized and part referenced and everything. This is interesting that they have you grease that little area right there. I have assembled more than a few differentials for brand new kits, and none of them tell you to put grease there, and I always put grease there because it's an obvious place when you're putting this together that you're going to be putting that O-ring down over that dry. Why would you want to do that? So why not put grease there? Even when the instructions don't tell you to, I always have. So it's just, it's nice to see that, you know, someone else is recognizing and referencing that. So here, as you see on the next page, we'll go to step B and we'll build the other two differentials and move forward from there. For the build that I am doing, I'm going to be using 1500 weight in the center diff and in the front differential, and 10,000 in the rear differential. So let's go ahead and open up bag A. Also, any place that I can, any place that I have the hardware, I'm going to be swapping out steel in favor of titanium or aluminum, if aluminum is even viable. It's very nice that everything is packed very individualized. You know, like these have a lot of sharp edges and could potentially, you know, damage some of the small paper and rubber items, and they have them, you know, isolated. Does make for a little more work cutting bags open, but that's quite all right. This is an area where I would definitely want to switch the hardware. Steel isn't that much heavier, but when we're dealing with high-speed rotating mass, anything I can do to lighten this up, I'm going to do. For example, they provide us with a plastic or composite gear. If this was made of steel, this would be quite heavy, and made out of composite or plastic, it's extremely light. Now you notice I've got a shock stand out, and you may be kind of curious as to why. That's because I find it very easy when building these, and I'm adding fluid, to set them in the shock stand and then fill them with fluid, let the fluid settle, and then make, you know, adjustments as needed. And you can also see that they appreciate the value of lightening up the rotating mass. They do make these hexes in aluminum, but stock and available as replacement parts are these composite, I'm not sure exactly what you would call these, star, you know, it's a 4-point axis for your gears for your differential. And by making this out of the lightest possible material, it's going to reduce the weight and there's 3 differentials. That means there's 3 of these. So, you know, they can, you know, use nice metal gears and let the weight go here, but, you know, reduce weight overall by going with composites for things that they can, like this drive gear and like the spiders that are going to be in all 3. So let me, right off the bat, size this up and see if I have titanium hardware in that same size. These are my titanium flatheads, and I'm thinking that 14 millimeters is going to do it. Yep. So I'm going to go ahead and pull out 4 14 millimeter titanium screws. And just out of curiosity, I'm going to weigh them up against the steel ones just to see what we're saving. It's not going to be dramatic, but it adds up. And if you've watched some of my other build videos where I've used titanium hardware, you'll have noticed that it adds up quite substantially. I recently was doing a build on a on the Slash, and not just the titanium, the other lightened hardware that I used, the lighter drive shafts were 10 grams or 5 grams each saved. I think it was 6 or 7 grams total per side in titanium hardware saved. Multiply that 4 times on a 4-wheel drive vehicle, and you start coming up with substantial numbers. Okay, so our titanium hardware is going to weigh in at 1.58, let's just say 1.6 grams. And our steel hardware should be about almost twice that. Not quite, 2.81. So that's 1.6. So that's 1.2 save. If you wanted to be technical, 1.17. Multiply that by 3 differentials. Okay, since I'm going to be using the titanium hardware, I'm going to be taking a steel screw. I'm going to be threading it into all 4 of these holes and then backing it back out, cutting threads, basically tapping these holes for the screw. That way the titanium is not going to be overly stressed when I screw them in. That is something you should always do for titanium, and especially if you use any aluminum hardware. You don't want it to heat up and shear, then, you know, break, leaving part of the screw inside and you're stuck. So if you're going to use titanium or aluminum, always pre-thread the holes with a steel screw. So I'm not going to do that on camera. There's no need for you to watch me run this screw in and out of 4 holes. It's just a waste of time. So again, I'm just pausing. Okay, I've cut the holes and I have run across my first dilemma. I purchased a ceramic bearing kit for this kit, and not all of the bearings that I need are in here, it would seem. I went onto the Fast Eddy site. I've had very good luck with Fast Eddy bearings, and their ceramic bearings seem to be excellent. Very noticeable difference from stock kit bearings to these. On their website, they have 2 different kits for the 410.3. One of them says for the 410.3 4-wheel drive. The other one just says for the 410.3. Now, I'm not aware of a 410.3 that's a 2-wheel drive. and there's this fairly substantial price difference. This kit was about $90. The other kit, which was not on my normal vendor site when I went to buy a set of bearings, it's $160. So I'm going to have to contact them on Monday morning during business hours and find out why my kit does not have the bearings for the differentials, and I don't know what other areas are not included. I would think that if you were buying a bearing kit, that these would be very important bearings to be replacing, as they are primary drive bearings. But in any event, I'm going to cross this bridge when I come to it, and I'm just going to continue building with the standard bearings, and I'll go from there. I may just build the kit completely with stock bearings, get this ceramic issue sorted out, drive the kit maybe for my first event with the standard bearings, and then do a rebuild with all ceramics throughout, and then get a feel for the real performance difference between them. So, you know, because sometimes I'm doing this in the blind. There's a lot of times where I'll build a kit with the ceramics from the get-go. I have no idea what the real world difference is, if any. So, in any event, I'm going to go ahead and assemble with the stock bearings. Now, depending on what you're doing with your kits, one thing that can be done to speed up bearings a bit is to remove the seals, rinse out all of the grease with like motor spray or brake clean or something like that, and then use a bearing oil instead of a bearing grease. Now that does mean that you're going to have to disassemble and do maintenance a lot more often. I would think every 3 races at most you would want to do a full tear down and clean and lube all of the bearings again, because that oil is going to, you know, wick out, and you're gonna lose it faster. So but it would certainly make them go faster. For example, I'm going to be building a kit here in the very near future. It's actually sitting behind me, and it is the TLR 22 DC 5.0 Elite, and it comes with sealed bearings that are filled with oil instead of grease, specifically to make them faster. So you know, that's not just a me tip talking. That is something that manufacturers are actually selling cars with the bearings oiled instead of greased to increase speed in especially in smaller vehicles. Like 2-wheel drive buggies could very much benefit from that. They don't have the heft of an engine, especially if you're running spec class. Anyway, I'm not going to do that with these bearings. I'm just going to build with the stock bearings, and then we'll see where the whole bearing issue goes later. Okay? So, we basically need to put a bearing on there. And again, I'm going to be going to this ProTech RC premium white grease. It is supposed to be designed for low wear and reduced noise, and I've had fantastic luck with this. I'm really happy with this product. I recently just bought 2 more tubes of this. They're on the shelf behind me, because I'm going to use this, you know, ongoing. It is my go-to grease of choice when I'm building cars and doing maintenance. And I need to make sure I keep a towel handy. Let me just make sure that those are, yep, those are identical. I'm going to make sure there isn't a left or a right or an up and a down or whatever. One for the inside, one for the cap. So this is going to be fun getting this, and that's one of the reasons I kind of put a little grease up and down the top here, not just in the groove, is because I want to be able to get this O-ring on here with the least amount of effort and least possibility of any damage. It is hard to get them on. Once you if you get it over the top with your finger and press it on, then you can just kind of, you know, go around the edge with a wrench and tap it down into the recess at the bottom there. So now we are going to put on a shim. And, you know, an easier way to get these on is probably to put them over a wrench, drop the wrench down like that, and let them just slide down the shaft of the wrench onto the piece there. So next is going to be getting a, okay, we need, let's see, one, let's get all these out. Okay, so that's all of our gears. These are all identical. Just wanted to make sure there wasn't some difference between the two. So for this, a needle nose plier is probably going to serve us best for this. We're going to get one of these pins into the shaft here. There we go. Got it started. Too far. Okay, so it's more or less centered, and now I can drop the gear on top and it is seated. Okay, so now I need to take the 4 gears, and I hate putting this together without any lube. Let's see, this is the center one. The center and the front one are going to have 15. So and this is nasty thick stuff, but I think this is worth doing. You don't want this to run dry the first time, and it's so thick that lube might not actually get into the gear, in between the gear and the shaft here. So pre-lubing it a little bit is probably a wise thing to do. Sometimes I've done that with this type of lube in the past, but I have also worried that it was contaminating the diff fluid, since it's, you know, a different viscosity. Even though there's not much in there, you know, I still just, you know, I wanted to put something on it, but I didn't, you know, because I didn't want them to run dry. So you can definitely feel the difference once they pick up some of this gooey, sticky, honey-like diff lube as you rotate them on it. So I think it's worth doing. So you just slide that in like that. And when you seat it down, you can see that I'm holding it from the center. If I rotate it, all gears turn. So now let's see how full they want us to fill this. Okay, apply grease to the groove. All right, yeah, I did that. Okay. Okay, fill oil to 1 millimeter below full. Do not overfill. So they want us to fill it within 1 millimeter of the top. That seems like an awful lot. especially since this gear has to go down into it. But I'm gonna take them at their word. Let's go ahead and prep this part. This is much easier because we're not having to work inside a little bucket. Make sure that you put your bearing on, you don't forget, otherwise you gotta take it back apart. I have done that once or twice. It's an easy mistake to make. And we put in our pin. Get that centered up. And we can drop our gear on. Now, this is going to want to drop off the minute we tip this over. And here's a little build trick that if this is thick enough, it'll work for us. Okay, now when we tip this upside down, our gear doesn't drop off because this stuff is that sticky. So that's a handy thing to have, because otherwise when you try to put this on top there, you're either got to put the gear in by itself and then put the assembly on and rotate it till the pin clicks in, hoping the pin doesn't slide out while you flip it over. Or you've got to try and get it in there to get it to work one way or another. Now when we fill this, we're gonna do a little rotation on it along the way. So we're gonna start by getting it partway full, and this stuff is messy to work with, but just be patient with it. So now I'm going to rotate those gears and let them basically draw a lot of that sticky lube down into the housing there, into airspace that was otherwise not full of fluid. So just slowly back and forth a few times, and so now we can just let it sit for a moment or two and let the fluid settle. We're not a millimeter away yet, but I'm almost skeptical of that measurement anyway. I mean, a millimeter to the top is really topped off, but okay. There are a few little bubbles in there. Well, that does look pretty close to full. Okay, so now I'm gonna start one of the screws. These MIP drivers are fantastic. The tolerances are so tight. Not totally tightened. Get the next one started. And then I can just hold this with a towel from there because I've got it held down with 2 screws. There's a couple reasons I'm going from screw to screw back and forth like that. Number one is because the friction heats them up. Heats up the metal. You get the metal and the plastic too hot, you can shear the screw. It's not likely to happen with titanium, but you still want to be careful. Also, you do want to kind of do a bit of a star pattern on the tightening when you get down to the end. There we go. Everything looks sealed. There we go. Got a nice diff action going there. Nice and smooth. That's what we want. Okay. So we are done with bag A and steps A, and we are going on to bag B. It's our front and our rear differential, and it's basically the same set of steps. The only thing difference is one of them I'm going to be building with a with 10,000 instead of 15,000. That'll be my rear, and I will be sure to mark that What I'll probably do is take a silver Sharpie and put a little R on one of these diff caps and an F on the other for front and rear. That way I never mix them up ever again. Nice and easy to do. And of course the other difference is instead of this big plastic gear, there's going to be a metal pinion type gear or ring gear. So let me just open the pieces and see if there's anything else that's unique. Other than that, I'll just pause up the video and I'll build these without you having to see me do the same thing that I just did over and over. And it looks like, yep, everything is the same, just twice as many parts. So, okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tap all 4 holes in both of these. That way they are threaded and ready for the titanium hardware. And then I'm going to just proceed with the build as you saw it the last time. Okay, diffs are done. As you can see, I did an R and an F in silver Sharpie, which is a really nice metallic color. It almost is like a paint kind of thing, and you don't have to worry about it coming off anytime soon. And so these can be set aside for now. Now we're on to C. And I pulled out D as well because we're going to be doing both of these, one right after the other. And I've got a couple of Tekno option items that I'm adding to the kit. I decided to go ahead and get the carbon fiber shock towers. And I mean, the main thing with short course trucks seems to be weight. The Tekno is probably the heavier of the 2 main short course trucks that are out there for competition, which is the Tekno and the Losi. The TLR is an outstanding truck, and I very, very seriously considered buying it. Things that made me go with Tekno was designed in America. Never had one before, thought I'd do it, and the fact that they recognize that the 4x4 short course trucks, with all the weight of the drivetrain, the larger motors that they require, the heavier packs, they really fall into the 8th scale class when it comes to the mass of the vehicle, not just size, but mass. A 2-wheel short course is going to be the same size, but it has the weight of a 10th scale vehicle. Slightly heavier, but still in that range. The 4x4 is much heavier than, say, a 4x4 buggy. The 4x4 buggies do not carry the mass of the short course trucks because the suspension has to be that much beefier. And Tekno went with a 16mm spring sized shock absorber. That is an 8th scale shock, which means it's going to share springs with my buggy, my 8th scale buggy, which is great. So I can get an array of springs for each of those vehicles and then put them all in one big 16mm box set and use any of them for those vehicles. So if I've got 2 Tekno springs, now one's a little too, one's too soft, one's too hard, and the Kyosho that's in the middle of the 2 might be just right, and vice versa. So it gives me a broader range of spring options. So as I was saying, weight seems to be the real killer, the real thing that drags down a short course truck. And anything you can do to reduce that weight, especially with high weight, in other words, a weight that's higher on the chassis, to lower that center of gravity, is worth doing. That's one of the big reasons that I chose the Kyosho Inferno 8th scale buggy, the MP10E, because instead of using a big 4-cell pack or a pair of 2 cells, you know, side by side, the way a lot of people are doing, and a lot of the kits only give you room for a single 4-cell pack. This uses a pair of 2 cells. They are flat and they are on either side of the driveline on the chassis. And that really lowers the weight, spreads the weight out over the middle of the chassis, and it's going to make for a really well-balanced vehicle. I cannot wait to finish that off and get driving and racing that. I'm going to be running that this winter too. One of the tracks that I go to, they really don't do 8th scale stuff. So that's why I'm kind of you know, in a push to get this truck and my new 2-wheel drive buggy to run spec class finished, so I can get out to this other track for some racing. So anyway, let's do a little comparison. You've been looking at these part numbers for a while on the screen. I'm going to go ahead and hold them up for you here. There's 1, there's 2. The nice thing about these is you're not relying on a third party to have made them fit properly or done the same hole pattern, so it matches your spec sheet. These are made by Tekno for Tekno kit. So very nice items to have on hand. And I wanted to, while I was at this stage here, I'm going to go ahead and open the D-bag real quick. I'm going to pull out the shock tower, because the shock towers are in these boxes. Now, bear in mind that if you are building yourself this kit, you've gone out and you've gotten your Tekno SCT410.3. The 0.3 has a lot of the performance options in it, because it's the 3rd generation. They've kind of built it up that way. These aluminum towers are extremely light as they are. They're just not quite as light as the carbon. But we're going to go ahead and check that out. And remember, this is weight up high. These are up above our diffs. Most of the mass is above that differential line in the vehicle, so it's weight that we definitely want to reduce if we can, lowering the center of gravity. Okay. 56.16 grams, and if you wanted to round up, that would be 56.2. And 35.47. So 21 grams, basically, is our difference there. 21 grams is a lot, and especially, you know, up high. And when I do other things like replace the steel screws for all 4 of the upper shock mounts with titanium instead of steel, that is, you know, going to take even more weight that is up high. I mean, you've got to kind of look at your car as an upside down pendulum. Any high weight is weight that makes the car want to list in turns. As you go into a turn, it's going to make that car want to bank to one side or the other, to the outside of the turn. And the higher that weight is and the heavier it is, more it tries to push the car over. So good thing to be able to reduce that. Now I'm going to take a few minutes and I'm going to just lightly sand these edges, and I'm going to hit them with some CA to protect them and give them some longevity. It's not really an issue on a short course truck because the short course truck is covered by a body. So, you know, actually I think I'm going to just not do that at this time. I may do it later, but you know, I've got a lot to cover here with you guys, and I need the filming time. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that off. I'll definitely do it to my buggy, because, you know, the buggy, your shock towers are exposed. But for these, they're underneath a Lexan body. There's a body mount above them. They're unlikely to be, you know, grinding on the ground and getting damaged. So I'm okay with them as they are. But again, that's 21 grams, and that's 21 grams off of something that's already very, very light. So if you are building this and you are trying to save every dime you can, stay with these. Don't go carbon fiber. Put that money towards something more tangible, something you need, like tires, motor, you know, a faster motor. Things like that are going to buy you more bang for the buck. But if money isn't really an option, or if you're at a phase where you've got some extra money, maybe you don't want to, you know, go the expensive titanium bolts route, but you do want to shave weight as much as you can, this is a good place to do it. It's weight that's up high, and it's 20 grams gone, 21 grams gone, just like that. So something to consider. Okay, this is our front. This is C, out of bag C, and the front diff case on the Tekno has a slight angle to the input shaft because of the kick in the front of the chassis. And as you can see, this actually kind of keys on. There's a little bit of a lip here and down here, so it's a little bit of a seal. It also, you know that you're locked into position when it kind of clicks in. So let's get our parts out. Got a couple shims to contend with. And let me see about a titanium option for these screws. I did buy a lot of the hardware for this kit in titanium. There was not a kit available, but I did go through the kit, through the instructions and the PDF version after purchasing it, before I began this process of assembly, and looked and tried to buy as much of the hardware as I could. And that is our right size there. Those are 14 millimeters and 3x14s. And we need 4 of them. So, before I get rolling on that, I want to identify the holes that I'm going to be putting these in and tap them, just as I did on the differentials. So, 2 of them go in here. No, here. That's not very clear. You got to look at the second image. It would have been nice. See, you're looking at these, and it's hard to tell whether they're aiming them for these holes or these holes. You kind of get the idea they're going here. Having a little line there would help. The second image, you can see that there's no bolt heads down here, but there are up here, and we are trying to close this case. So again, makes sense. But it would be nice if there was a little you know, a little line like this little dotted line here, just to indicate that. Not a big deal, but when there are multiple holes on the same surface, it helps if there's a little more clarity. So anyway, so these 2 holes, and then these 2 holes here. So we're really only closing the case with 2 bolts. We're not locking down the bottom right away. I'm just confirming by looking through here. No, in fact, we don't do that till later when we're actually bolting on the aluminum plates that hold our suspension. So those are going to be some long bolts to go through a piece of aluminum here all the way through this half of the case and then into here some distance. So, but I may actually have purchased those. And again, this is our front. This goes to our rear. So just checking this out here. Yeah, that fits right on there. It's nice. And of course, I'm going to kind of have to guesstimate whether it faces one way or the other. The shocks, I believe, are forward mounted. Let me just confirm that. Yeah, okay. So since the shocks are forward mounted, this is the front of the diff. The cutaway should probably be towards the rear. That's how I'm going to assemble it. There's our pinion. Okay, so 2 bearings. One is going to go in here. One is going to come in here. We're going to need to slide in our pinion gear, and this is where our little first of our 2 shims goes, like that. And there's our little out drive, and there should be a large grub screw. And this is where we are going to use Loctite for the first time. Any metal on metal, put on Loctite, even if they don't say so. Let's see. There we go. Definitely want to make that tight, and that is a place that I don't mind using a little extra Loctite. Don't want to glue it in, but you want to make sure that it's not going to go anywhere. Now this is 2 shims. They're very thin and they are stuck together. So front differential, and our ring gear faces the left side. Second. And those are going to be fun to slide in. Let's try kind of going vertical with that. Oops. Okay, now before I go any further, I really should have tapped these. I'm going to go ahead and pause this. I'm going to tap these two holes and these two holes for the titanium. Okay, now I've got them tapped, and I was reading in the instructions about these shims, and because I was having a hard time getting them both to fit in there, and it's kind of a trial and error to get the right amount of gear mesh. You should always try to have one on the gear side. If you get you know, if it's not meshing properly, which it seems to be doing just fine, and you've got any movement, you can have as many as 2 shims on this side or no shims, but the goal is to, you know, move this over enough. So I'm going to start the build with 1 shim on the gear side, no shim over here because it's fitting snugly with just 1 shim. I'll run a race or two, you know, get a few battery packs through it, and I'll do I'll pull the diffs and check the mesh, and if it's still fine, I'll, you know, just go with the single shim, and if necessary, I'll put a second shim in on this side. Looks like we're doing fine with 1, so this is where we add grease. And they seem to have the same philosophy that I do of putting a line of grease all the way around, and anything that you don't need is just going to get flung off onto the inside of the case. You can't really over grease it. Well, you can't. Wait a minute. Did I just say that out loud? I apologize, because I know someone will fill this thing to the, you know, to the bursting point with grease. You don't even do that with crawlers. This is more than enough grease, and like I said, the excess just gets, you know, thrown to the sides, but it's better than not having enough. And so we're good to go with this. So I can go ahead and close this up. I need to make sure that shim stays in line properly. So I'm kind of keeping my eye to that side of the diff as I close up. And all is well. So now I can put these 2 screws in. I just wanted to look and just make sure that, yeah, there's no depth issue there. They just look large. And these are the size. .3mm, not 2.5s. You don't want to over tighten these because we're not bolting the bottom yet. So if you tighten too much here, it's going to start separating the bottom. So I would just snug these down, you know, so that things are taut, but I wouldn't over tighten. And then once we get to the point in the build where we are totally closing up the gearbox here with the bottom ones, I would then tighten these 2 top ones again. I would just revisit them with a quick tensioning. So the cutaway side facing the rear. Now, it does look like this is going to make for decent maintenance because you notice there's 2 more holes up here, that are going to fully anchor this shock tower onto this rear half of the case. But because of the way this is shaped here, this can stay on when doing differential service. So pulling these two, the sway bar would have to be disconnected, and then whatever goes along with taking out these two, and that half case is going to come away. So this should be able to be left, well, there's also these two bottom ones that are going to mount to the, are going to be part of it being mounted to the chassis. So 2, 4, 6, 8 screws, hopefully, would be all it's going to take to pull that half of the case off, pull out our diff, and do any kind of servicing. So that's nice. And I'm going to start a parts box very soon for this kit, because I'm going to start accumulating pieces like this unused shim. I'm just going to stick it in there for the moment, but I'll be using one of those tackle boxes that I use for all my kits. And it's nice to buy bulk like that. I usually buy them in 4-packs. It brings the price down, and I like having them all be the same size. They stack better. It's easier to transport them or find places to fit them, things like that, when they're all the same size. Okay, so right off the bat, I'm going to go ahead and tap those 4. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like and please subscribe to my channel.